My paper is titled Feeling Like a Queen in Late Capitalism. It's hard to stop rebels that time travel, but we at the Time Council pride ourselves on doing just that. Thus begins Janelle Monáe's music video, Q.U.E.E.N, featuring Erykah Badu. In this opening scene, Monáe, Badula Oblongata, Badu's moniker here, and members of Monáe's musical collective Wonderland all appear to be in stasis. The voiceover, revealed to be a white woman speaking from a video screen, representing the Metropolis Ministry of Droids, continues. Welcome to the Living Museum, where legendary rebels from throughout history have been frozen in suspended animation. Together, Monáe and Badu, she explains, quote, launched Project Q.U.E.E.N, a musical weapons program in the 21st century. Researchers are still deciphering the nature of this program and hunting the various freedom movements that Wonderland disguised as songs and motion pictures and works of art. With the end of this narration, a young black woman speaks in a record of Q.U.E.E.N and plays it on a skull-shaped turntable. As the music starts, Monáe and the other musicians slowly begin to move until they become fully reanimated. While popular music is often seen as an unviable site for political action due to its imbrication in capitalist production consumption chains, the opening of Q.U.E.E.N suggests theories of social change and gender and sexual transgression might in fact be conveyed covertly through such songs, that they might be disguised as songs and motion pictures and works of art. Using performance studies, sound studies, and queer studies methodologies, I read 4 scenes from Janelle Monáe's Q.U.E.E.N music video as scenes of objection and transgression, as resistance within constraints. I argue that while Monáe's artistry is undoubtedly constrained by late capitalist modes of production and consumption, this containment is not a completely successful project. Rather, Monáe's motion pictures gesture toward alternative ways of being and feeling that exceed late capitalism's violent, racialized, and gendered practices of devaluation. The Living Museum, within which Monáe, Badu, and the members of Wonderland are first situated, evokes the violent practices of museums and world fairs via the living ethnological displays of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The methods of display present in the scene point to these racist and racializing practices. 2 black Wonderland members are encased and frozen in a large glass display box. A white pedestal displays black and white shoes, while a skull sits atop a nearby pedestal. This staging demonstrates how performance was a crucial aspect of these violent technologies of race, while their state of stasis critiques how these display cultures racialize some bodies as frozen in time so that other bodies could imagine themselves as the epitome of progress and modernity, or here as a ministry of droids. Linking the colonial violence of the Living Museum's archive logic to the musician's frozen state, the opening scene thus performatively critiques the racialized and gendered violence of hypostatizing projects, which presume here to stop rebels who time travel, or from traveling through time. Importantly, however, this scene does not reproduce the archive and as colonial violence as a completely successful project, but rather enacts its failures to contain, its failures to actually stop rebels who time travel. For instance, the young black woman's stealthy introduction of the record phonically interrupts and resists the colonial violence of the researchers who decipher, hunt, and hypostatize. This act might be read as an enactment of a rival geography, a, quote, alternative negotiation of and mapping of space. Playing the record violates the Living Museum's boundaries of space and time, which hinged on the fixity and time and place of black bodies and asserts a rival geography characterized by song and motion through time and space. I want to suggest that Monáe's position as museum object further challenges the archive logic of the Living Museum, revealing its failure to fully capture. In Bodies That Matter, Judith Butler suggests, quote, if the copies speak, or if what is merely material begins to signify, the scenography of reason is rocked by the crisis on which it was always built, end quote. This passage resonates with Fred Moten's critique of Marx's failure to allow for the possibility of speaking commodities as a failure to account for the words, voices, and resistances of enslaved black people, quote, as the objection to exchange that is exchange's condition of possibility, end quote. In attending to Monáe et al.'s presence as museum objects in this scene, as what the archival logic is treating as merely material, I think it is important to consider and rematerialize, following Moten, quote, the complex interiority of the object, end quote. I suggest that the interaction between Monet and the record make audible Monet's objection to archival arrest, which is the condition of possibility of the archive's hypostatizing project, and thus demonstrates the archive's failure to fully capture or contain. The record, a commodity that sounds, that speaks, phonically interrupts the spatial temporal dominance of the archive by reintroducing the conditions of possibility of Monet's archival arrest, her objection to that arrest. Hearing her own objection to stasis sounded through her record, Monet reanimates herself, moving into an alternative spatial temporal ordering, in part generated by the archive's failure to perform and maintain capture. While Monet certainly labors for her own social and political desire in the opening scene, specifically her desire to resist the violence of archival arrest, in a later scene featuring backing vocalists and dancers, Monet articulates her desires in a back and forth during and with the chorus. Following Daphne A. Brooks in Bodies in Descent, in reading this scene, I endeavor, quote, to make the black and female body labor not for the spectator, but for the dancer herself and her own social and political desire, end quote. One such desire that emerges during the chorus is the desire to enact a dialectic of communication and coalition building via the rejection of dominant modes of aesthetic judgment. Monet and several other Wonderland members sing together, "Am I a freak for dancing round? Queen. Am I a freak for getting down? I'm cutting up, don't cut me down. Queen. Yeah, I wanna be, queen." Soloing over the chorus, Monet comments on the desire to dance implied in the chorus's questions, adding, "Am I a freak? Don't judge me, don't cut me down." The use of Monet's voice in the chorus aligns the other chorus members' voices with Monet, representing them as engaged in the same struggle. Monet's solo vocals might also be read as pedagogical. For instance, Monet sings "Don't judge me" over the choruses "Am I a freak for getting down?" Following Monet's lead, the chorus's next line, "I'm cutting up, don't cut me down," echoes this refusal to be judged. In this way, Monet positions herself as a leader offering a trajectory out of dominant aesthetic judgments, whose desire to dance sans judgment contributes to a drive for coalition building with other Black women and with other queens. In another sung series of questions, with these backing Wonderland performers, Monet articulates her pleasure in watching other women perform, and suggests that the non-normative is a productive site from which to sing or theorize. Monet sings, "Say, is it weird to like the way she wear her tights?" And Mary sings back, "But I like it," affirming this pleasure as mutual and consensual. To Monet's sung question, "Am I a freak because I love watching Mary?" Mary and the other singers slyly respond, "Maybe." With this playful response, Monet's backing singers resist recuperating queer pleasures into the normative. Kathy Cohen's call for a politics of deviance provides one framework for reading this resistance. Such a framework, quote, would read non-normative activities and attitudes as forms of definitional power that have the potential to help us rethink how value is defined, parceled out, and withheld, end quote. The response, maybe, to whether Monet is a freak does not repudiate Monet's pleasure in watching Mary, but rather affirms that this pleasure might be non-normative. Although freak indicates pathologization, I argue that the teasing way maybe is sung allows for misfires, where being a freak becomes desirable. In the context of the rest of the scene, where Monet asks if her movements make her a freak, questions she evades and interrupts with the directive, "Don't judge me," we might read these questionable acts as examples Monet offers to help us rethink how value is defined, parceled out, and withheld, and to claim her non-normativity as pleasurable for herself. In this next and third scene, Monet positions herself as learning from and engaged in struggle with Erykah Badu as Badula Oblongata. Badu/Oblongata sings to Monet, "Baby, this melody will show you another way. Been trying for far too long, come home and sing your song." Gesturing towards Monet, Badu appears here as a mentor who aims to share this melody and show Monet another way. With her voice and song, Badu thus points to the ways that song can act, quote, as a tool to disrupt cultural and historical amnesia and elision, end quote. Following Badu's solo melody, Monet and Badu sing together, "But you gotta testify because the booty don't lie. No, the booty don't lie. Oh no, the booty don't lie." Providing a genealogy of Black feminist thought and visual representation, Jennifer Nash explains that for some scholars, quote, "the violence of the visual field is its reductive work. its insistence that Black women can be rendered synonymous with excess and that this excess is located in the buttocks. End quote. Badu's medicalized moniker, Badula Oblongata, recalls how scientific racism has continuously enacted gendered forms of racial violence through the visual and so-called material, often via a fascination with imagined sexual and physiological difference, as in the early 19th century display of starchy barkmen. As Hortense Spillers argues, in the 20th century, the dehumanization of Black women continued via the discourse of sexuality, where the symbolic power of sexuality has attempted to render, quote, the Black American female, whether whore or asexed, as fixing the frontier of woman with her own being, end quote. While Spillers thus critiques the discourse of sexuality for positioning Black women as always already on the borders of womanhood, she does not see this vestibularity as necessarily negative, but rather locates a resistive potentiality in not approximating white womanhood. Through their claim that the booty don't lie, Monet and Badu similarly locate a resistive potentiality in this excess, insofar as it resists dominant epistemologies. Turning away from the discursive and toward the booty's movement through song, they point toward the potential to enact another way of being in the world that does not revolve around visuality as violence or the discursive's will to knowledge and truth. While they maintain that the booty don't lie, they do not simultaneously claim that the booty tells the truth, but rather that it offers another way, that requires one to testify, to bear witness and affirm. Demonstrating this other way, Monet and Badu and the members of Wonderland dance silently and playfully during a musical interlude. The closing scene of the music video introduces a dramatic change in aesthetic registers, both vocally and visually. Appearing first on the screen where the now-defunct white woman had earlier narrated the living museum scene, then in the entire frame of the video, Monet stands alone against a dark background, lit by two intersecting spotlights. At the intersection of the spotlights, Monet thus appears to be at the center of a giant eye. As she raps, "Let's flip it, I don't think they understand what I'm trying to say." Positioning herself in view of this eye and as its pupil, as that which takes light in, Monet's gesture does, at least, triple work. She both refuses to be glanced away from and becomes a site of absorption that defies any static state of being looked at. Moreover, in directing her gaze at the camera and viewer once a third light illuminates her, Monet confronts the spectator with her own positionality as a viewing subject/object. Moten asks, quote, "What if glancing is the aversion of the gaze, a physical act of repression, the act of forgetting of an object whose resistance is now not the avoidance, but the extortion of the gaze," end quote. Illuminating herself with spotlights, Monet seems to anticipate this glancing and intervenes by forcing the gaze to focus on her and her song's political intent. In addition, in Monet's lyrics, "I don't think they understand what I'm trying to say," the they can be read as multiply constituted and multiply signifying. Lacking a clear antecedent, they, I suggest, can be read as unfixed and mobile. They might refer to those who aren't meant to understand, to dominant subjects who are not queens. Alternately, they might refer to the potentially politicized audience. In this sense, Monet's lyrics can be imagined as preaching, quote, to the not yet converted, to those who don't yet understand what she's trying to say. While the Q.U.E.E.N music video is certainly mediated by capitalism and dominant aesthetic practices, including glossy imaging, high production value, and designer apparel, I argue that Monet's performance can also be read for the traces, glimmers, residues, and specks of things that point to otherwise modes of existence. Through the acronym Q.U.E.E.N, Monet conveys the need to link the oppressions of queers, untouchables, immigrants, the excommunicated, and negroids, or black androids, as an intersectional political and social formation. The resistances present throughout these four scenes might be thought of as queer changes of presence, utopic feelings of potentiality that evoke ways of being and feeling that might exceed capitalist violent practices of devaluation. Thank you.